Hi, my name is Constant Brand, and welcome to another episode of EEA Ask an Expert. Today we are joined by Almut and Senna, and we are talking waste prevention, and in particular food waste and other waste streams in Europe. We recently launched a briefing on food waste a couple of weeks ago, but we'll get into other aspects as well, including the country fact sheet we also published on this issue. On food waste, on waste prevention. If you have any questions or comments for our guests today, please jot them down in the comment section and we'll make sure we get to them during our show today. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I guess the first thing is, what are we talking about when the problem of waste and garbage? How big of a problem is it?
Well, we produce, like every citizen, on average, around 5,000 kilograms of waste in the EU. Of course, only about 500 kilograms only is like the waste you produce as a citizen in your household. The rest is from industry, from construction, from mining, and all of that. This is a huge amount of waste. It can be bad for the environment, depending on what you do with it, but it's also full waste of resources. So we really need to do something about it and reduce the amount of waste we are generating.
Yeah. Sorry, you want to add something?
I can add a little bit when it particularly food waste. There we waste around 59 million tons every year.
Okay.
And so per European citizen, over 130 kilo. And most of us from household half of that. And that's not only wasting food, it's also wasting everything that went into producing this food, the waste, the water, the land use, the chemicals, and so on. So as Almut says, we need to be more efficient with how we use our resources, because we know we don't have endless amounts of it. So yeah, we need to do more on waste prevention.
Yeah. And we're talking about two key terms today, waste prevention, and also perhaps we can talk a little bit about waste management. What do we mean by them?
Waste prevention means that we avoid that the waste is generated in the first place. And waste management is what you do with it once it is generated. So it's two different approaches. And from an environmental point of view, usually it's much better to avoid producing the waste than to handle it. And of course, you can recycle to some extent, but always like avoiding and preventing it is, from an environmental point of view, the best option.
Mm-hmm.
I can add a little bit on the food waste perspective here.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a cheese at home, and if you prevent the waste from the cheese is that you eat it before it goes bad. But if you manage the food or the cheese as food waste, you might collect it and produce biogas or compost. So you use just a little bit of the resources in the cheese compared to producing a new one that you would buy if you don't eat the one you have.
Yeah. So management basically is I'm putting the cheese in the compost bin for collection rather than going in the other waste, which could end up in landfill or something. Or
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's very important that you just don't have the waste, that if you can manage it so you don't even occur, that's very good for the environment.
Yeah, good. Again, if you have any comments or questions, please get them in to the comment section, and for sure we'll get to them. I guess it's a good time now to talk a bit about the fact sheets and the briefing per se. Could we perhaps talk about the fact sheets first?
We do the overall assessment and work on an EU level, but then like a lot of the measures and the policies are happening on the country level. So we have developed a set of country profiles or fact sheets that collect information. What are the countries doing on waste prevention? What are their policies? What are their targets in their national strategies? And we do that in a systematic way, so it is comparable across the countries. And it is a source of information. We have those country fact sheets on waste prevention, including food waste prevention. We also have a set of country fact sheets on waste management with a focus on municipal waste or household waste and packaging waste.
And how are they used?
in the first place, it's a wealth of information that can be used by many different stakeholders, by the countries, for example, to learn from each other, to understand what are other countries doing to prevent food waste, for example, how are they collecting their waste. This type of information. Journalists can use it, but also citizens can use it. And we also know that the European Commission is using those fact sheets when they analyze the implementation of policies, of environmental policies in the EU.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing is that if you work at a national environmental protection agency, you're developing some strategies, for example, to reduce the waste of furniture. You can look, what should we do? Let's see what other countries have done. We also add in these fact sheets if the policies have been evaluated, if they were effective and so on. So it's like a platform where you can get ideas and learn from each other.
Yeah, okay. Now turning quickly to food waste, the briefing, what is it about? And basically, I guess the question is, how big of a problem is food waste in Europe?
Yeah. So food waste is a big problem, not only in Europe, but maybe specifically in Europe also, because we waste food very late in the value chain. So it has been produced, we have carried it home, and then we waste it. So it has a large environmental footprint. If we look at the greenhouse gas emissions in Europe, 16% of those from the food system comes from food that is wasted. We could have prevented. And then at the same time, it's also a food security issue, because we have over 42 million Europeans who cannot afford a quality meal every second day.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we're throwing away 59 million tons a year. It's also, if you look at an economic aspect, the market value of the food we waste is 132 billion euro per year. So we have a lot of money, not on the environment, social dimension, like also money to save by throwing less away.
And what does the report talk about what actions are being done on this?
Yeah, so in the report, we look at the food waste as a problem, but then also specifically assess what countries are doing in terms of policy implementation to reduce food waste. And we look what actions they have taken, and what we can see is that a lot of actions at national levels have been on the voluntary measures, like campaigns to change behaviors, date labeling campaigns and so on, but have not been less of these more market-based regulatory measures, like setting up clear targets and with measures like make it more expensive to throw, or maybe even forbidding throwing away food that can be eaten. So we can see that there is a potential there, or an unused potential, to actually use a more diverse set of policy instruments.
And why does it matter? Why should we care about the food waste problem? I mean, it economically it has an impact.
Yeah.
And socially it has an impact.
And environmentally.
Yeah.
Not only greenhouse gases, all the chemicals that we put into the production, all the land use, all the water use. If we ate more of the food, we wouldn't have to grow as much, and then we would reduce the environmental pressure, which would be good for biodiversity, for example.
Yeah. For example, our data show that nearly 60% of all the water that we extract in Europe is used for agriculture, including mainly for producing food. When you look at the land use, it's nearly 40% of all the land we have is used for agriculture. So, which then is not available, for example, for nature.
Yeah.
So this has a really big impact. And then at the end, when we discard food waste and we throw it away, in those cases where it is landfilled, it produces methane, which is like one of the most potent greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
So it has a lot of environmental implications, which we would like to avoid.
Certainly, and these are not something I personally would think about when buying an apple or whatever in the supermarket. I mean, how can we get this information over to consumers? And obviously, they're not the only players here.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to work on many areas here. Sometimes it's very effective to have the information in the moment when you are about to buy something. So, for example, there have been initiatives in some countries like France, others, to sell these called wonky fruits that would have been thrown away because they're ugly. and say, so this apple would have been thrown away, but maybe you can eat it, and then you start thinking, oh, because I always pick the nicest apples, some will be left and then will get old and will be thrown away. So that's one way. You can reduce prices on things that are close to expiration date. So, okay, I have to eat it today, and then I prevent it, and then maybe you can have information on how much water was prevented, how much greenhouse gases. So that's one way. But there are so many areas that we should have this information and raise the awareness. Restaurants, for example.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so much. I don't know.
So many examples. I learned last year from a colleague from Spain that there is now all the restaurants, they have to give you the leftover food that you don't eat, so you can eat it the next day at home. So, and it's an obligation for all the restaurants. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting example. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also this example from France that I really like, that if you have a grocery store, you cannot just throw away food that could be eaten. You need to have an agreement with a charity organization and others, and you have to donate it for food distribution for people in need of food. So it's actually a ban there to throw away edible food.
Okay, great. Before we dig into more on this issue, if you have any comments or questions, now's the time to post them in the comment section, and we'll make sure we get to them over the moment. So we have a question from Tone, actually. What about textile waste prevention? Is there an urgent need for waste audits? There's methane emissions here too. Of course, another waste stream that we have done work on.
Yes. So textile waste prevention. We had a briefing last year about textile waste prevention as part of the circular economy. Absolutely, a very big need to prevent textile waste by like extended lifespans of textiles, which we can have through the Eco Design Directive, and more also more reuse of textiles, and a big problem with the increasing amounts of textile consumption and also increasing amounts of textile waste.
Textile waste is also the same problem as with food waste, that producing the textiles has a huge environmental impact upstream. Often it's not in Europe, but in the countries from which we import the textiles. A lot of water is used, a lot of chemicals are used, and if we use a piece of clothing only 3 times and throw it away, then all that is wasted as well.
Yeah.
And on top of that, textile waste is very, very difficult to recycle. It's not designed for recycling, so all of that is usually lost and incinerated.
Because
most
of
it.
What it's made from.
Because it's made from so many different materials which cannot be taken apart and so on. So it really should reduce the amount of textile waste we generate.
And we also we don't have the capacity in Europe at the moment to collect textile waste separately, even if it's mandatory since 1st of January this year. To sort it, as these sorting plans, we don't have enough, and then we don't have the technology and the recycling facilities. There is not enough demand from the industry either for recycled textiles. So we need to go higher up in the waste hierarchy and start preventing it from the beginning, because we haven't solved the other stages. Even if when we have solved it, we should still stay up and prevent it, because you just get a little bit of the resources back when you recycle.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back a little bit back to food. A question from Tina: is the problem of food waste increasing or decreasing in the EU, and how are we doing in terms of the 2030 targets?
Oh, interesting. Ooh, tricky question. So we don't have so many years where we have measured food waste, but from the years we have, we can't see any development either up or down. And the new proposed target is to reduce with 30% from households and retailers and restaurants to 2030, and with 10% for food production.
And, sorry, this is an EU target.
It's
for
a new
all
proposed
EU member states.
Yes.
By the Commission.
By the European Commission.
Yeah.
So now countries really have to start thinking over the measures. Are these sufficient to go from a rather stable level? We haven't seen any decrease. To actually decrease with quite a lot, like 30% from households. So to answer the question, we don't know, but we cannot see a clear progress, but not either that it has increased. Would you agree with me?
Yeah. Food waste is very difficult to measure. Because much of the food waste is in the mixed waste, and then this is not accounted for or really measured on a regular basis. So you have to do very detailed, extensive studies to find out how much food waste do we actually have. And this reporting on food waste only started a couple of years ago, and it still has to develop, and all the countries are improving their measurement methodologies and trying to get better data. So it is a bit challenging to actually know what has been progress or not. But we will start analyzing if the prospects of all the EU member states towards meeting those targets for 2030 next year. And then this will most likely be published in 2027.
Okay, and just by comparison, what stream do we have the most data on as far as waste?
I think the best data, or the longest time series going back in history, is for so-called municipal waste, which is like the waste we produce in households and similar in schools and offices and so on. There we have data going back to 1995. And then we have also data for industrial waste and all of that, where we have data from 2004 onwards, but every second year only, because waste statistics has to be collated, and it takes time, and it comes with a 2-year delay.
Right.
So it is not as we have data for GDP, which we have like for every quarter.
Yeah, understandably. Okay. Again, if you have questions or comments, please get them in. We're almost out of time, but I want to get to what can be done. What are the next steps? What's being done? So you talked a little bit about prevention awareness campaigns. Anything else we can add here?
Yeah, so all countries, they have a responsibility, according to the Waste Framework Directive, to develop national strategies. So that can be very context dependent. But one thing that we have seen from research and also from good examples in countries is that when they collaborate across the value chain, that can be very successful in preventing food waste. Something that is, I would like to mention a few things here. So this could also be incorporated in green public procurement, for example. And there are countries like Denmark, just an example, where in there, when they procure school lunches, they include the waste prevention aspect, include the training of staff, they have to measure the food waste, they have to have So that's something we could do. We need some more clear targets also in countries, and better monitoring of hotspots. Where in the value chain do we have the most what should we call it, avoidable food waste also. And then develop the policies based on that information, and also evaluate what have we done before. Did it work? If it not worked, why not? What we could see in our assessment is that, unfortunately, many member states, they don't evaluate systematically or in a transparent way their policies to prevent. So there is, what should we say, potential here to really start improving the evaluation and develop new policies based on that data.
Mm-hmm. If I could delve into sort of the food value chain, as it were, what causes food waste along this chain? Where does
I can start, maybe you want to fill in. So if you start at the primary production, that can be different things, like you thought you had a big order and then you don't, so suddenly the market prices maybe go down, it's not profitable to harvest, or that creates food waste. It could be that your vegetables, whatever, they don't fulfill the quality criteria, sometimes how it looks even. And then we continue to the production, and there could be a lot of inefficiencies, there can be errors. Something went wrong with the packaging, you put the wrong label on the olive oil, and then suddenly you can't sell it. And actually, that is often wasted. There are some new initiatives that you try to relabel it and resell it in different markets. But those things. And then we move on to restaurants and retailers. Do you want me to take that?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. And that's often, like, the portion sizes are too big. You're like, that's a big reason, actually. Or that you have a buffet, and when you once have had a buffet, you can't really take everything back and store. There are very strict regulations. And that could also be that people, have overestimate how much they could eat, and so on. It could be incentives. So actually, a good example was I went to a sushi buffet, and you could have it, but if you had leftovers, you had to pay a fee for that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was nice. So then you became aware. Oh yeah, you know. So there are things to do, but I took those stages. Maybe you want to go into the household.
Yeah, in households,
Yeah.
of course, like citizens can do a lot, and like the A&O is actually the planning, to plan for what will I need, and not to overbuy, and rethink. Well, do I really need that much, or maybe I need less? And then also, it is a skill you need to develop.
Yeah.
Like not everyone can do that easily. And
Sometimes it's not easy if
it's
it's
not
small
easy.
kids
But
or-
also you have to learn how do you store your food in a way
Yeah.
that it holds longer. Should you put it in the fridge or not, and how to wrap it and things like that. You need to learn. And finally, for example, what you do with leftovers. Do you freeze them so you can use them another day, or there's a lot of opportunities, and there's definitely a need for education and for getting better knowledge on how to avoid food waste. One issue is that if you start measuring yourself how much food waste you have, then often people become aware, because everyone thinks, I don't waste food. But when you start measuring it, yes.
Yeah.
Well, for instance, here
Yeah.
we sort our waste in Denmark, and you do physically see the food waste that you have to put in a separate bag, rather than
Exactly.
dumping it in that black bag,
Yes.
Yeah.
and you just forget about it.
Yeah.
So you do see it, and you see it every day.
Yeah. It helps,
And it helps.
raising the awareness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Certainly. We have sort of a question here from Arthur. Since the food waste is concentrated at the end of the chain, closer to the consumers, some people, restaurants, consider food donation, which we're talking about. How does the EEA understand food donation sharing, considering HACCP, food safety legislation?
A good question. There is, you have to really be aware of the food safety regulation here. So that's why the European Commission, through DG Santé, have developed a very clear guidance on when you can donate and what requirements have to be fulfilled and so on. I don't know that in detail, but I can definitely share the guidance, or you can probably find it pretty easy online. But it always has to be followed, the food safety guidance. But you can still, it has been a little too much emphasis on that and too little on the waste prevention earlier. So that's why they have developed this new modified guidance. I hope that helps. Another thing that is really a big reason for throwing away is that people often consider best before as bad after. It's not true.
It's a confusing terminology.
It is. It is. And I'm also scared to try and smell something that is after best before. But we have to start,
Yeah. But I've seen recently on packages that it says best before, but often good after.
Oh, that's
Okay.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I haven't seen
Ah,
that.
Yeah. For instance, for milk, for instance,
Yeah.
exactly. You do
Ah.
the smell test and
Yeah.
the sniff test and whatnot. And
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for sure.
Exactly.
So perhaps we could say what's the the European Union doing in this area more of? What else are we? You mentioned targets. You mentioned
Yes.
legislation.
They do quite a lot to have also set up something called European Platform for Food Waste and Food Loss, where they gather this, they provide this place for the industry, member states, NGOs and others to come together around a few different topics. One is food prevention policies, for example. Another is food donation. So that's a tip for someone who wants to get engaged in that. And then, as part of the Waste Framework Directive, there is this food target, their guidance on food donation. There are also really a lot of good material on how to educate consumers and school materials in different languages. So I think they're doing quite a lot here.
Okay. And on the broader, perhaps more policy level, we're talking about shifting to a circular economy, shifting to circularity. How does waste prevention fit into this?
Well, when we think about circular economy, many people think about recycling, but it's much more than that. And waste prevention is part of those strategies which you can employ to get more circular. It means like rethink, refuse, but there's for food it's more difficult, but for other products, for example, you can design them in a way that they hold longer. You don't have to discard them. You can maybe repair them easily and extend their lifespan. There's also, like in more professional area, you can even remanufacture, like a machine you can remanufacture, so it functions as new and can be sold as new again. And we think that those strategies, beyond the recycling, need much more attention in policies than they have had in the past.
Okay. And what work in the EEA is doing on circularity and on waste? What's coming up?
What's coming up? So now we're looking at, last time we developed a waste prevention monitoring framework, then we had this food waste focus, now we're moving into reuse as a key enabling strategy for waste prevention. So now we're looking a lot about that. How can we increase reuse? And we're also looking at circular bioeconomy, where also how to strengthen that.
Another topic we have recently started working on is how can we reduce the demand for critical raw materials, which is like in technology, for energy transition, for many aspects of our economy very relevant. And specifically, we are looking into if we would employ circular strategies beyond recycling, what could that help to in this area of critical raw materials?
Okay, great.
Like extending the lifespan, for example.
Good. Great. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for you today, but we have the links to the country fact sheets in the comments section, as well as the food waste briefing, and also perhaps worth mentioning the textiles briefing as well, and the Circularity Metrics Lab.
Yes, that's good.
Perhaps explain briefly what that is in a minute or less. Can you do that?
Yes. So the Circular Metrics Lab, that we tried to give you an overview how the transition to circular economy is progressing.
Yeah.
So you can look for plastics, you can look for textiles. We'll have on social and economic consideration soon, product lifespans, and there are some indicators and there are some just research and studies that showing how we're doing.
Okay.
So I recommend having a look.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Alma. Thank you, Senna, for your time. And thank you. For your time today. And we'll see you next time.